All right. Well, welcome back. This is episode 27. So today, Paul is going to sail for Rome. Of course, over the last 4 weeks, we've seen Paul give testimony to a great number of people. Um, After the third missionary journey, he came back and he was arrested. He was taken into custody by the Roman centurion there in Jerusalem. The Romans did bring him before the Sanhedrin, but once the Roman centurion found out he was a Roman citizen, he took him to Caesarea to be heard by Felix. Of course, Felix kept him in jail for 2 years, hoping somebody would come and try and bribe to get him out so he could make some money there, but no one did. So Festus finally came in and took over, relieved Felix as governor. Festus was now governor, and Festus heard him. He wanted to settle everything and offered to take him back to Jerusalem to be tried. And so Paul appealed to Caesar, and Festus then decided, well, let me, King Agrippa the second's here. We'll let him hear. And of course, Agrippa was almost convinced to be saved and decided there was nothing guilty. But he had already appealed to Caesar, so off to Rome he had to go. Today we're going to look at the trip he's going to leave Israel and head out, and he's going to end up getting shipwrecked on the island of Malta. Today we're going to talk about the trip to Malta because it's pretty exciting. It covers the whole of chapter 27 in the book of Acts, and I mean, some of the things that are recorded in the Bible just full of excitement, and this is one of those stories as you see this ship sail on. But I want to look first at his timeline. All right, so I've done a couple things here. I've recolorized this thing. So this is all his early life in yellow, and then green is the first missionary journey, blue is the second missionary journey, and purple is the third. And so after the third journey, he's arrested and he gives testimony to the Sanhedrin, to Felix, to Festus, and then to King Agrippa. So now he's heading for Italy, and so he's going to sail today for Italy. So this week we're going to talk about this trip to the island of Malta. Next week we'll talk about the 3 months he spends in Malta, and then after that we get into his arrival in Rome, and we're going to talk about a lot of the books that he wrote while he was there. I've got two maps I'm going to use today. The first one is this one that I normally use because it really names everything. We're going to see as he leaves Caesarea, he goes to Sidon. He's going to go up around Cyprus and sail past Cilicia and Pamphylia and come to Myra. And then from Myra, he's going to come up through this little inlet to Cydnus and then down to Crete, where he's going to stay on the north side of the island and then come back around to Fairhaven. And winter's going to be setting in. They're going to try and come over here to Phoenicia, and the storm is going to take them out to sea, and they're going to end up on Malta. So that's the route. I like this one because this lists the names of things. This one shows the route, and so you're going to see from Israel up around. Now, the reason they didn't go into this area is because the storms were bad, the winds were bad, and so they avoided it. So they went up this way and come back, and then once they got down in here, they got caught in those stormy winds. And we're going to talk about the storms too. Now, there's a storm that we're going to talk about. It's basically a nor'easter in the Mediterranean Sea, and so the winds come from the northeast and just kind of swirl around, and so they're going west up here, and then they just come, once you get down here, they're going east, and so these storms just get really bad down in here, and so that's why they're going up around all this stuff. You're also going to find out that Paul is relatively free, and so uh, we'll come back to these maps. I want to read through this account real quick. So we're in Acts chapter 27, but I want to go back to chapter 26 first real quick, because this is, when he spoke to Agrippa, Agrippa told him in verse 28, after Paul told him, King Agrippa said to Paul, almost thou persuadest me to be a Christian. And so Agrippa believed in the prophets of Israel and believed in the God of Israel. And Paul said, I would to God, not only thou, but all that hear me this day. And so he really was hoping that his testimony would lead people to believe in Christ. When he had spoken thus, the king rose with the governor and Bernice, and they that sat with them, so their whole party, and they'd gone aside, talked amongst themselves, saying, "This man does nothing worthy of death or bonds." And Agrippa said to Festus, he might have been set free if he had not appealed to Caesar, but he did appeal to Caesar, and so to Caesar he must go. And so that's where we find ourselves in Acts 27. And it says, when he determined that they should sail to Italy, they deliver Paul to a centurion, other prisoners to one named Julius, a centurion of the Augustus band. And so this really is just saying, I don't know if you're familiar with the military, but you know, you have different leaders over different areas, different groups of people. So you might have a general over here that's in charge of all these people, a general over here in charge of all these people. Now, when I was in the Marine Corps, there was a special group of people that were called the presidential security, and so those Marines really just were focused on securing the president. So they worked primarily in Washington D.C., Camp David. They would fly in Air Force One, Marine One, wherever they needed to be to secure the president. So I think that's what this is. This Augustus band is people that are basically there to serve Augustus. And so they entered the ship called Artemisium, and they launched, meaning to sail by the coast of Asia. One Aristarchus, a Macedonian of Thessalonica, was with them. And so I haven't really looked into uh, why this is recorded, why this Thessalonian was with them on this trip. It's really not part of today's lesson, but maybe that'd be a good Bible study if you're interested in going deeper. Just see if you can figure out who that man is and why he's with them. So verse 3 says, the next day they touched aside, and Julius courteously entreated Paul and gave him liberty to go to his friends and refresh himself. So right now, Paul wasn't really in chains, I think, because Augustus and Festus really decided that he wasn't guilty of any major crime. He wasn't chained up and treated as harshly as other criminals. And so when they went to Sidon, which is just on the coast, bring this map back up, this one right here. So you see Caesarea down here, Ptolemais, Tyre, and Sidon. So they basically just skipped up the coast here, and now they don't want to get in this sea, so they're going to go around Cyprus, past Cilicia and Pamphylia, and into Myra. And so that's what's going to happen here. And so verse 4 says they landed thence and they sailed unto Cyprus because the winds were contrary. That's what I'm saying. That area, the winds were stormy, and so they went up to Cyprus. And when they had sailed over the sea of Cilicia and Pamphylia, they came to Myra, a city of Lycia. And there the centurion found a ship of Alexandria sailing to Italy and put us therein. And so he transferred them over to the authority of another ship. And so now they're going to head out. And verse 7 says, when they sailed slowly many days, and scarce there came over against Cydnus, the wind not suffering us, we sailed under Crete, over against Salmone. And so basically what they're saying is they left Sidon, they went around Cyprus, Cilicia, Pamphylia, into Myra, and then when they left there, the wind was not working with them. I mean, it was just, there was no wind. They had a hard time getting to Cydnus, and so they ended up coming back down here towards Crete instead of following this path. They came down here. And so Salmone is on the northern side of Crete. In fact, I can bring this other one up. See, it's right there. That dot right here is Salmone. And so that's where they're going to pass by that and then come around to Fairhaven. And this is Phoenice. And so this is where they're going to go from Fairhaven to Phoenice, because they didn't want to spend the winter there. So just to catch you up. So it says, verse 8, hardly passing it. So they went against Salmone and they passed by it. They didn't really stop. They just went around it. And they came to a place called Fair Havens, which was there under the city of Lycia. And when much time was spent, when sailing was dangerous, because this fast was now already past, Paul admonished them, said unto them, Sirs, I perceive this voyage will be with much hurt and much damage, not only of the lading and ship, but also of our lives. So he's actually warning them of danger of continuing on. Nonetheless, the centurion believed the master and the owner of the ship more than those things which were spoken of Paul. And because the haven was not commodious to winter in, the more part advised to depart thence also. So basically, they're just saying, you know, Fairhaven was not a place that was good to be there for the winter. And so they were advised to depart, and by means they might attain to Phoenice, and there to winter, which is a haven of Crete, that lieth towards the southwest and northwest. And so basically we're saying this place here, Fairhaven, is no good for the winter, but we need to come here to Phoenice, which is a better place for the winter. So that's where they're headed. And you're going to see, just like this arrow turns, they get caught in a storm and they can't control the ship, and so they're lost to sea for 2 weeks. And so that's why that little thing is there. So verse 13 says, not long after there arose against a tempest wind called Euroclydon. Now, I'm going to put a link in the description below. This Euroclydon is I don't know if I saved it. It is a storm, kind of like a nor'easter in the Mediterranean. The official pronunciation is 4 syllables: the EU, your, rock, ROC, LYDON. So Euroclydon. But most people refer to it as Euroclydon, and I think they do because it's primarily a European storm. It only really occurs here in the Mediterranean Sea, and so you might hear it referenced as Euroclydon, but the official pronunciation is Euroclydon, and it's a sea storm. In fact, I'm going to play this uh, this video real quick so you can kind of see how a sea storm can batter a ship. But they're going to get caught up in this storm from that's noted in verse 14, and they're going to be in this storm for 2 weeks, for 14 days. So let me play this video for you real quick, and I'm only going to play about a minute and a half of it. See how the waves just beat that boat around. The other thing you're going to find out in this reading, they didn't eat for 14 days. Probably because if they'd eaten anything, they would have gone back up. I just can't imagine being in this kind of sea storm for 14 days. Makes me seasick watching it. All right, so that'll give you a visual picture when reading through this. Oh, here's the Wikipedia page. I'll put this link down below, but this talks a little bit about the storm, how it was named, what it is, and so there's some other links there that you can kind of see. If you see the cycloning way there, it comes from the northeast. So that's some good stuff. So let's continue reading here. Verse 14 says they got caught up in the storm. Verse 15 says, when the ship was caught and could not bear up into the wind, we let her drive. So they couldn't control it. Running under a certain island called Claudia, we had much work to come by boat, which when we had taken up, they used helps undergirding the ship, and fearing lest they should fall into quicksands, they strake sail and were so driven, and being exceedingly tossed with a tempest, the next day they lightened the ship. So they're tossing stuff overboard, trying to lighten up the ship, I think. The third day we cast out our own hands and tackling of the ship, and neither sun nor star in many days appeared, and no small tempest lay on us. all hope we would be saved was then taken away. So they were losing hope of of surviving. And you're going to see here, Paul is going to be visited by an angel and tell them about it. And so verse 21 says, after long absence, Paul stood at forth in the midst of them and said, Sirs, ye should have hearkened unto me and have not loosed from Crete to have gained this harm and loss. And now I exhort you to be of good cheer, for there will be no loss of any man's life among you, but of the ship. So they would lose the ship, but not life. And there stood before me in the night the angel of God, whose I am and whom I serve, saying, Fear not, Paul, thou must be brought before Caesar, and lo, God hath given thee unto them that sail with thee. Therefore, sirs, be of good cheer, for I believe God, and it shall be even as he told me. And howbeit we must be cast upon a certain island, and the 14th night was come, and they were driven up and down in Adria, and the midnight the shipmen deemed that they drew near some country, and sounded and found it 20 fathoms. Now, this, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Red October, but they would send out a ping, a sound, and based on when the sound hit where it was going and it came back, they could tell how far away uh, the vessel was. And so that's what they're doing here. They're sending out this sound and waiting to hear it come back to them, and that tells them how far they are from another object. And so they sounded, found it 20 fathoms, and then when they had gone a little further, they sounded again and found it 15 fathoms. Fearing lest they should be fallen under the rocks, they cast 4 anchors out of the stern and wished for the day. And so they're at night, it's stormy, they're in the rocks, so they cast out their anchors, trying to keep the ship from moving, and so that they could wait for daylight. And it says, as the shipmen were about to flee out of the ship, they let down the boat into the sea under color, as though they would have cast anchors out of the foreship. And so basically, they're saying they cast the anchors, they want to get out of this boat. So they put down the rescue boat, put the flag on it, and we're going to flee the ship. And so basically, Paul's going to tell them, if you do that, you're going to die. You need to stay on the ship. So verse 31 says, Paul said to the centurion, to the soldiers, except ye abide in the ship, ye cannot be saved. And so the soldiers cut the ropes of the boat and let it fall. And while the day was coming, Paul besought them to take meat, saying, This is the 14th day that ye have tarried, and continue fasting, having taken nothing. And so that's why I'm saying they spent this whole 2 weeks without eating. I expect it's because they couldn't hold it down under the fierce winds and rocking of the boat. Says, therefore I pray, take some meat, for it is for your health. You're not a hair shall fall from your head of any of you. So he's saying, you're safe to eat now. It's almost over. And when he spoken thus, he took bread and gave thanks to God in the presence of them. And when he had broken it, he began to eat. And they were all of good cheer, and took some meat. And they were all in the ship 216 souls. That's 276 men. And when they'd eaten, they lightened the ship and cast out the wheat into the sea. So they basically threw all the rest of the food out to make the ship lighter. And when it was day, they knew not land. They discovered a certain creek with a shore into which it were minded, and it were possible to thrust in the ship. So basically, there's this little inlet in the land where they could get the ship in there and kind of rest in between, the shores. And so, falling into place where the two seas met, they ran the ship aground, and the fore parts struck fast and remained unmovable, but the hinder part was broken with the violence of the waves. So basically, you had land, the ship came into the land, the front of the ship hit the land and was stationary, but the back ship was still kind of floating around in the waves. So the soldiers' counsel was to kill all the prisoners, lest any should escape. But the centurion, wanting to save Paul, kept them from their purpose, a command that they should swim. Any that should swim should cast themselves into the sea and get the land. The rest went on boards and broken pieces of the ship, and it came to pass they all escaped safe land. So the ones that could swim swam over to land. The ones that couldn't grabbed something to hold on to float, so that they could protect themselves. And so they ended up at the island of Malta. So that's where they are now, this island over here where there's going to be shipwrecked. And like I said, when they were at Crete, winter was setting in. So winter has started to set in here. And next week, I want to talk about the island of Malta. Of course, Paul gets bit by a snake here. And nowadays you hear about these snake charming cults and all this stuff, and basically people claim that if God's with you, snakes can't kill you, and that's not true. But I do think that there are certain protections that the apostles had, And I'll read that verse to you that really suggests that because the apostles were given certain authorities, others weren't given. They were also given certain protections. But uh, you're also going to see how fickle the faith was of the people on this island. I mean, one day they think he's a devil, next day they think he's a god, and eventually they realize he's just a man. But I mean, I see that in modern day culture too. I mean, people's beliefs blow with the wind, and I mean, the Bible talks about that. You know, your doctrine being blown around by every wind of whatever people say. So next week's going to be really exciting. I love the story of the shipwreck of Malta. And so I hope you'll join me. I hope you enjoyed this one today, and we'll see you next week. All right. Well, thanks for stopping in with me today, and God bless you.